Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today on the podcast, we welcome back our regular guest host, music journalist Jon Burlingame, to talk about Joker, Folie à Deux. He's in conversation with the film's composer, Hildur Guðnadóttir, who won an Academy Award for her score for the first film, as well as executive music producer and supervising music editor, Jason Ruder. I'll let Jon take over the introduction from here.
We're delighted to have with us today two of the leading musical creatives involved with Joker, Folie à Deux, Todd Phillips' much talked about sequel to 2019's Oscar-winning film Joker. This one starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga. Hildur Guðnadóttir is the Icelandic-born, Berlin-based cellist and composer who won the Oscar for her original Joker score and who also has an Emmy and a pair of Grammys. Her other film scores include Chernobyl, Women Talking, Tar, A Haunting in Venice. Welcome, Hildur.
Thank you, Jon. Great to see you again.
And the executive music producer of the film, Jason Ruder, whose 100 or so credits include some of the most honored films of recent years. In addition to the original Joker, he also worked on The Color Purple, Maestro, Babylon, Nightmare Alley, A Star is Born, and La La Land. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
So you both worked on the original Joker. Tell us how you met and how early you were involved with the original film.
I mean, it's pretty much all Jason's fault, really. I think we have Jason to blame for this whole situation.
I guess I have to answer that one. I was a huge fan of Hildur's. For several years before Joker. I had a long history with Todd working in his camp as a music person. And I think when Joker came about, he sent me one of the first scripts. And first he was like, what do you think of this movie? I feel like it's kind of a risk. And I just fell in love with it on the page. And then he told me Joaquin was involved. And then I just completely lit up. And then he said something interesting. He said, we got to make the music just as risky and special as the movie. What in the hell are we going to do? And I think I lost a lot of sleep those few days. I really took it to heart because I was so moved by the page and really listened through a lot of scores and composers and thought about it. And, I came back to Todd and I said, I think you really need to take a leap and find go beyond the movie, like a brand, like what PTA does with Greenwood or, really form something unique, not just pick the type of composer out of a phone book. And he's like, so what do you got in mind? And I actually went through Hildur's albums and put together folders of pieces of music she'd done to the script. And I just kind of mapped it out for him and said, check this out. And he was like, wow, and he said, let me talk to Joaquin. And it just kind of exploded from there.
On this movie, Hildur, because I know on the first movie, you actually started writing before shooting. Was that also the case here?
Yes, it was. I mean, it was a super interesting process because obviously for the first film, we had really established what the sound world was very clearly. And I think we all thought it worked really well. And it was such a big part of his character. So we didn't want to, go too far away from that sound world because it felt like, like changing his makeup or something like this. It felt like it had to be, of the same world. But of course, there was this additional storytelling device of the songs being incredibly present. So I think on set, there was a lot of music like score being played on the set too, like in the first film. But obviously also they were singing the songs live on set. So with a live keyboard player. So clearly there's a lot of music on set and a lot of music happening live, but not just the score this time. So this time, it was a shared stage of different music.
So, Jason, talk a little bit about that, will you? Because clearly, for those who haven't yet seen the film, songs play an integral part of the narrative. And I wonder if you can talk about how that came about, if the songs were in the script, and then what the role of songs were in terms of telling the story.
It was interesting because, again, Todd gave us the script early, and he and Scott Silva had brought most of these song choices to the table, which I thought were, like really whipping out the great songbook, and twisting it into this movie. And I just thought, wow, this is going to be a challenge. And then, it really took us a beat, I think, in pre-production to be like, how far are we going with this? And what's the line? And we really didn't know. It's like, is it more, obviously it's a love story about two crazy people. It's a continuation of Arthur. Now you have Gaga in the fold, which is a whole new force of nature, and is a music force of nature as well. And, I think we were all trying stuff to go, what is the tone of this? And is it more crazy to lean more into a glossy Broadway feel, or is it more, can we actually make these song choices gritty and sound like the first movie? And I think after lots of trying things and recording, and Hildur making stuff and Gaga making stuff and other arrangers we enlisted making stuff, I mean, Warner Brothers was gracious and everybody to give us quite the playground to experiment with the tone. And I think once we all kind of got on this path where we were able to make it sound like Joker 1, I think everybody was like, okay, this is special and it's unique. And it went with Joaquin's comment, which is, we got to make this music sound like nothing I've ever heard in my life, which is obviously a large direction to chase.
So what was the process? I mean, both of you have said now that the songs were actually recorded live on the set, which I think is not the usual way of doing a musical. I mean, don't you normally pre-record songs and then the actors lip sync to them? That was not the case here, I guess.
Right. I mean, I think I'd done Star is Born with Gaga, and I think, she came in, it was the first time I'd worked with her. And she was super adamant. She got together with Bradley and then just said, I want to do all this live on set. That's the only way I know how to do this. It's the only way it's going to read. Bradley agreed. And I think we did something unique on that movie. And I think on this movie, she was really like, we got to go even further to make this, very grounded in reality from a storytelling standpoint. So we came up with, they both had their pianist on set that would just follow and lead and, kind of just set the tempo of the different days that we shot. And it gave them the freedom to, act as well as sing. So it wasn't like this sort of sweaty musical that just hit you over the head when somebody started singing. And basically we shot the whole movie that way, knowing that we were going to go back and, get Hildur and song arrangers and bring in a lot of talented people to really craft something super unique and work around this performance that they created.
I'm guessing that the actors had a significant say in how this would sound.
100%. Yeah, they were definitely, and it was, I think by the time we rolled camera, like I would say that Joaquin, Gaga, Todd, we were all on the same page. We don't know how we're going to do this technically yet, but hit go. We all know what the creative vision is. And I think it was amazing to see that kind of caliber of creatives all on the same page for something tonally.
before somebody goes to see this movie, is it possible to say the role that the songs play in helping us understand these people?
I think so. Don't you, Hildur? I mean, it feels like it's part of it is a crazy relationship story with two crazy people it's a love story to some extent with deceit and all kinds of things in it. But, it 100%. It's very character grounded, all of it.
Yeah, and I think Todd has talked a lot about kind of seeing the songs almost as a part of the dialogue. That the lyrics of the song are just kind of, because they of course knew what songs they were going to use while they were writing the script. So I think they're thinking about the lyrics also in these scenes that they're using. So it was. I think the idea behind going this direction is definitely to use the music as a storytelling device to its maximum, both through the not just through the score like we did in the other film, but also because of course Arthur in the previous film had clearly like a very strong emotional connection to songs, even though he's not singing them himself. Like songs are really important to him in the first film, so it's just kind of taking that a step further and allowing him to to sort of bring that into his dialogue.
So you mentioned the sound world that you were creating for this movie. I wonder if we could talk in a little bit more detail about this. I'm getting the impression that it was not exactly the same sound world that you created for Joker, that there are new instruments involved here. And I wonder if you can tell us, A, what those instruments were, how you went about that, and B, what role they played or what colors they may have added to your musical palette.
We really wanted to honor the sound world that we had already established, so we didn't want to go too far away from it. So we knew that there would be strings and there would be sort of like a cello connection somewhat. Well, it just so happened that my instrument that I used in the first film got stolen a week before the recording session. So I had actually intended to just use the same instrument, but the gods of creativity were forced me in a different direction, which I was actually, I got the instrument back afterwards, but I was quite grateful for that extra push of just like, no, you're not allowed to use this instrument again. You're gonna have to come up with something new. So as I was kind of frantically trying to understand what I wanted to do, and like a big drive of how I work creatively, especially within the film world that I do is that I tried to use each film as an opportunity to learn something new or try out something new or explore something that I haven't explored before. And this being pushed into that, literally losing my instrument was a great way of just being forced into making something totally new. So I was looking at the story and I thought like, okay, so the role of the songs is kind of to take him outside and to create this fantasy world where he's free and he has all this space to communicate freely but the score is kind of keeping him a bit more in reality, or in his reality in this film is of course that he is in prison for most of the film. So I thought like, okay, how can the score actually imprison him? how can I almost like physically create a prison with an instrument. So I came up with this idea of creating like what I call the string prison. So it's literally like almost like an electric fence that's playable, and it was like an electroacoustic large scale playable string instrument that was literally formed this prison cell of like very, very, very hot strings that I played through another instrument that I had built within that. Luckily, I have know some pretty crazy people from Iceland who are willing to take the leap at working on such short notice to build all these new instruments. So I was working with father and son instrument builders from Iceland, Hans Johansson and Ulfur Hansson, who were so wonderful. So Hans built this trench cello for me that I was very interested in, because it was and I felt had a strong connection to Arthur also, because it's kind of like it's basically just like a plywood box that they used in the First World War, and they would attach strings and a neck to it, and then they could take it apart basically and pack it into the box along with their bullets, and then they would put it together and basically play it on the front line in the trenches. So that's why it's called a trench cello. So it had this, it had this kind of double function of literally being a part of their weaponry, and also as they said, they would use it to bring joy to the most horrific situation. So that kind of just, it really snapped to me with in connection to Arthur, because his mother was said to him that he was brought to this world to bring joy to people in horrible situations. So I thought, wow, that's really his instrument, and his way of trying to balance this horrific violence and this very like fragile joy-bringing mentality kind of also come together in this trench cello. And it doesn't sound too, because it's kind of like a wonky plywood box, so it acoustically doesn't sound too far away from also like the instrument that I used in the first film. It's of the same kind of in the same world. So I used this trench cello to play the string prison essentially. So I would play these large scale electric fences and have them kind of vibrate as they were both magnified and amplified. So they would make all these kind of crazy noises and pitch shifts and like as they're trying to find the frequency that's being played through them essentially.
That's unbelievably fascinating. And I wonder, did you try to explain all this to Todd, and in terms of what you were going to try to achieve sonically, and did he just say, sounds great, sure, or did he have some questions about it?
It was twofold. Like I kept having all these catastrophes happen at in this period, because obviously, when you're working on these film projects, you have quite tight deadlines, and you have like you don't have a lot of space for things to go wrong essentially. Like there's not a lot of extra time built into the schedule for things like having your instrument stolen or being bitten by a dog, which is what happened in the lunch break of the first day of the recording session. So that dog bite basically disabled my right hand and disabled my ability to play because I had to wear this huge cast on my right hand, so I couldn't play like I would normally play a cello, so I had to have all these like different playing techniques also. And I think Jason and Todd just kept getting these catastrophe reports from my end, and I think they were probably more concerned that I was actually just getting through the day alive at this at this point, rather than whatever I was doing, how it would sound, but I think also it was I think by this time also we have established like quite a strong mutual trust and friendship, and obviously like I worked so much with Jason, and we have a really strong bond and friendship, and I think there's just there's a lot of trust and a lot of faith in, luckily, in my crazy ideas actually something somewhat usable.
Jason, when you would get these messages from Hildur, was the reaction panic, or was the reaction, I need to make her feel better about all of this and just plunging ahead?
She's a dear friend, so we were obviously concerned about her first and foremost. But part for me, and I know for Todd, we were just like, just perfect for the whole, energy of the film. It's just like, because he and Joaquin and Gaga always said it. This is a crazy movie made by crazy people in a crazy process, and it just fell right into everything that we were doing. But I think most importantly, the trust factor that was established on the first movie, and Todd was just like, that's why we love her. Like it was just there was no a genuine concern. It was such a blessing to work on a movie where everybody was open to such creative risk, and I think it just made the process so exciting for all of us.
So, Jason, you were on the set, presumably, throughout the shoot.
Yep. Yeah.
And so your role was, what was your role when you were on the set?
Great question.
I think a lot of it was just rolling with the process on the day-to-day in person, whatever that meant. It would be Joaquin would call and be like, he's in a trailer and makeup getting ready, and he would be like, can you bring a laptop over? And he'd be in there with his pianist, and they'd be working through something, and Hildur would send me stuff, and then I would have whatever material I had on hand at that point. I had some pieces of the songs that I built into stems, and I was just proof of concept. I would mash up stuff that Hildur sent with things that we were making in the song world and start bending them. And, Joaquin would be like, on the morning of, like, well, can you just try and make it longer or darker, or maybe more levity at this moment, or more, and then he'd be like, can you twist the bathroom dance in it now? And, like, we just kept like molding stuff, on the morning of, and it helped him, I think, get in the mind frame to go on and shoot the day. Even though we seldom played that stuff back, it just helped everybody see where it was going. And I think, if we found something that he liked, he'd grab Todd, we'd grab Gaga. She might go, great, but I was thinking this, and then we'd bend it a different way. And I think we would, kind of go into each day like that. And I think a lot of it was keeping an eye on the vocals, listening back every take in headphones, going, this is good. We're happy with it. We know we don't have to go back and ADR anything, which we just didn't want to do. We wanted everything to come off the set. So constantly checking things, there were people would get slightly, their voice would wear out or whatever. And we would just go, I think we need to get another one tomorrow, or, just simple things like that, making sure that everything was native to the set as far as vocals was another big part of it.
There's a lot of songs in this movie. If you had to go back and then think about the shoot, what were the ones that really stood out to you where you thought, wow, this has been knocked out of the park? Were there two or three of them, or maybe just favorites of yours?
The Folie waltz was so special because it's really this moment between both of them. I think it's, Gaga wrote an original song. We have Hildur's music. It's the two of them in this waltz, which it's just like it's everybody firing on all cylinders, I think, for that scene on the music front, which I think just came out beautifully and unique. And I think you listen to it and go, wow, it's like an original Gaga song, but it's Hildurized with the sounds of the world of Joker 1. And it's just like, what did we just do? And I think, that was something on set. We started finding its way, and we did play things through the PA to get everybody going, and the whole crew was just kind of like, whoa, this is something. Like, you could just feel it in the room, so that was such a memorable day for sure.
Okay, so you used the word Hildurized, which I don't think I'd heard before, but I'm fascinated by it. How do you Hildurize a piece of music?
Oh God. That was a term I stole from Todd. I think, he kind of came up with it because, I think early on was, how do we take these standards and meaning not leave the universe of Joker 1, because he always said, and I think Joaquin and audience fans, I think you've heard that, while Joker 1 was, if Joaquin was the main character, Hildur's score was just as much of a character, right? So it was, how do we never lose sight of that, and how do we never lose our way with that? And I think, God, it would take days and days, I think, to try and explain that term. But it would mean me calling Hildur at whatever hour in Berlin, going, "Can you do something for us today?" And she'd be like, and she'd try and come up with something while she's in the middle of building an instrument, and I'm trying to bend the audio into something that some sort of horn, big band section that we had from somewhere, and really just starting to come up with this patina that was special to the movie.
So, Hildur, what are your memories of that? Were there, middle of the night calls, and did you dive back in to specific scenes? I mean, I love the idea that this score has been Hildurized.
Yeah, exactly. I think this, this film was so, it was just so full of experimentation. You just had to be kind of ready for it. Whenever the call came, or whenever there was like an idea, or whenever. I mean, it was obviously like quite a long process. Like it was a long time in the works. So it was a long time being on call for that, but it was just like, it really felt like the only way to really do this was just to try it out, and just there was a massive amount of failed experiments that happened in the process, like a ginormous amount, and like way bigger than anything that I worked on so far. But I am definitely, I'm all for it, because I think that, if you don't do it like that, then you just keep on working in the way that you know how it works. I mean, that's just so boring, because then you don't really learn anything new in the process. I think the only way to, it's like learning how to ride a bike. The only way to learn is just by stepping back on the bike. And my God, it took me forever to learn how to ride a bike. I think it took me like 2 years before I actually stepped on the pedals. So I'm very patient with that, and I'm very patient with experiments. And I think it was a really it was quite a brave thing, I think, on Todd's behalf to do a film in this way, and with such an experimental mindset, and it's a huge risk to take, because it's not without its pressure, like a film of this size, so I think it was really great to get to be a part of that, because I think it's a very fun way to work, even though you get calls at 4 a.m. with like, we need some like, this and that sound or whatever. It's like, all right, coming up,
And that seems like it's right up your alley, because I think you may be the most, you may be the most experiment-oriented composer, I think, in our time in the film world. Let me ask you this, though. There's also a fairly significant orchestral element to this score too, right? Did that all come in later, after maybe you'd seen a rough cut and then you figured out what needed to be bigger in sound? Talk a little bit about the use of the orchestra.
Yeah. I think we felt that we of course had some big orchestral moments also in the first one, but I think because the songs were kind of, as they were growing in size, we realized that the score needed to kind of also grow with it in places, because I think there has to be such a dialogue between the song and the songs and the score when you're working in this way. So it was kind of just like this, again, just experimental way of just working with the size and shape. So the orchestra size kind of grew and shrank also, like, with it. So, but I think as the songs grew bigger, the orchestration of the score kind of also grew with it a little bit. So that was just a part of this process.
Where did you record? I presume you recorded your own specific instruments there in Berlin, but I get the impression the orchestra may have been here in America.
Yeah, it was in LA. It was on the Eastwood stage, which was lovely. It was amazing. It was actually the first time that I've done an orchestra session in LA, and I loved it. It was really wonderful, and the orchestra was just so good. They were amazing. It was an incredible joy to record with them, and like so patient and open also for my vocal directions of how to play stuff it was really such a joy to record in LA this time.
So, Jason, can you talk a little bit about what was required in terms of post-production, in terms of the songs and what needed to be added, and how score and songs would all work together?
That was probably the hardest part, like what is the North Star of the tone of all this? And I think we brought in some very special people, I think, to help on the song side. I think that were invaluable. We brought in David Campbell as kind of our main song arranger, and David, who's done tons and tons of records, and he was such a great sport, because I just said, look, we're gonna make some of these true to the standard, and then we're probably just gonna bastardize them and twist them into things that might just. And he was just like game on, like he had the same spirit as us, where he was just like he just lit up over it. And he's just a wonderful guy. He's a wonderful song arranger. And and I said, by the way, there's no clicks for anything. Everything is just, as we're editing the movie with the picture editor, Jeff, it was, like, how do we make these scenes fluid and get them to a point with a piano track where they're somewhat musical, still fluid, but not just like a total train wreck as far as tempo and meter. So we'd get the picture to a place, and we'd mock some things up, and then sometimes it depend. Each scene was unique. Sometimes we would start with Hildur elements, and then sometimes we would start with arrangements that for all the song sessions we were doing. And, we never knew what was going to come first, but, I think we would just start to wind things together, move to the next scene. And then where it got very, very complicated is you look at the movie as a whole and go, okay, where are we? Is the needle too far? Is it too glossy where we're coming detached from, the Joker tone, or do we need to start calibrating more towards Hildur's score in the first movie? And there was a lot of just globally calibrating that needle across the entire movie. And that's where it got complicated, where we had a lot of people really like crafting scenes on the day-to-day and then looking at the film. And, I think it just goes back to the DNA of the first movie. I mean, we always said Arthur was a romantic, and it really struck me the very first version of the very first script I read in Joker 1, meaning a romantic that has music inside of him. And I think it was important to Todd and all of us, and Joaquin and, Gaga, and to really stick to that sort of core principle. And I think we just kind of kept pointing back to that as kind of the North Star of like where we were trying to go with all this. So, I mean, the process was insane, but
it was pretty wild.
How long were the two of you on this project?
What, 3 years?
Yeah.
3 years.
We had a marvelous team of people, music editors, arrangers, people that, were building instruments for Hildur, Sam Slayer. We just had so many valuable people.
This is a movie that's been mixed in Dolby Atmos. And I wonder, when the two of you are writing and producing, does that enter your thought process? And what role does Dolby, or the fact that it's going to be a Dolby movie, play in what you write or record?
I think specifically when what you're writing is essentially spatialized, like the string prison itself. Like when I was writing and playing that music, it was a very spatialized experience because it's essentially a surround instrument in and of itself, So it's definitely very exciting when you're, playing and recording that experience, knowing that the audience is also going to feel the same. It's going to feel the same amount of space and movement within the sounds. That's definitely really fantastic, because a lot of the ways that I well, especially when I'm like building this instrument, like spatialized instruments, that the experience is very surround dependent, and it is a very kind of surrounded experience of the writing process, so it's great when you know that the audience will also experience that, because then you just know that they'll get the full spectrum basically. So I love that, knowing that it's going to be in Dolby from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I love the technology. I think we got to credit our people. We had more or less the same post crew in sound as Joker 1, and on Star is Born, who dealt with Gaga's live vocals and Bradley's at the time. So Tom Lozanich and Dean Zupanzik, and then this time we had used Steve Morrow for on set, who had worked with Gaga and Bradley on Star as well. And I think from the song side, a lot of it was, with Steve Morrow, we record 64 channels on set. We're putting extra mics in the room and on the stage, and catching ambience and shooting reverbs and multiverb settings and things from a very, very early stage. And, Francesco, who works with Hildur, is very, putting the Atmos and extra mics up in the scoring stage, and really being able to capture some extra mic placements, knowing kind of where we're going on the sonic front, So I think it's another thing you have to keep in the back of your mind from day one, from the very first recording you make on all fronts, song and score. And, anybody that's kind of making a note of music for the whole process.
Well, it's endlessly fascinating to me, and I congratulate you both on the new Joker movie, which wouldn't be what it is without you guys and your contributions musically and sonically and on all around. So we're going to wrap there, I think. But thank you both Hildur and Jason, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Many thanks to Hildur and Jason for joining us on the podcast today. And thanks to Jon for conducting an excellent interview. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Warner Brothers for helping put this conversation together. Joker: A Folie à Deux is currently playing at a Dolby Cinema near you. As always, we have links in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, please be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.